Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. Happy Lord's Day. We're excited that all of you chose to be here out of all the places you could be. Children's Church, you all are going to be dismissed to go with Miss Hannah, Miss Carrie back there in the back, so you guys have a great lesson today. I do want to do a quick commercial for Wednesday night. I had a chance to come out on this previous Wednesday, and I get a chance to hear the Maldonado family, which is going to be sharing some of our music with us. And man, it's going to be a really, really good night. So I hope and pray that if you have the opportunity, you'll make plans to come out at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night and worship with us. It'll be contemporary worship. We're going to have somebody playing keyboards and singing, and another guy over here playing some drums. Who would have ever thought, right? But we're hoping that maybe that will allow us to reach somebody with a life-changing relationship with Jesus who doesn't have a chance to go to church on Sunday. They can come on Wednesday and get to know all about Him. So again, young and old, all are invited. We hope that you'll make plans to come at 6. The prayer meeting will be back there at 6:30, and we'll have a small devotion time up here at that time. Come on back. We'd love to have you. I'm excited to continue sharing today from the book of Colossians. We opened up our study last week. So we'll be in chapter 1, verses 15 to 23 today. Just 8 verses of Scripture that I really believe are going to change our lives and help us see Jesus as more than enough. Say that with me. Jesus is more than enough for us, all right? But how many of us, or how many of you have played this game before in your life where you had something really good, but you weren't satisfied with it, so you continued the conversation by saying, but it would be better with... ... right? Let's play the game a few times, all right? So, up here on the screen, pizza is good. With water, it's good. With a Diet Coke, my mind is blown, right? It's so much better, right? It's good with water. It's better with Diet Coke. Can I get anything on that? Yes, even if you don't like Diet Coke, right? What about this next one? Steak. Who can argue with that? Steak is good, right? But steak with a baked potato. Oh, now we're cooking, buddy, right? Excited about that. So we've got something we want to add to. What about this next one? All right, it's going to pop up here on the screen. Vanilla ice cream. Anybody a vanilla ice cream lover? You just like vanilla? All right. So you got ice cream. Ice cream all by itself is good. But... you put vanilla ice cream on top of a hot cookie, and you cover that with syrup, and do one of those cookie skillets, it's a whole next level. Your mind is just taken to a whole new place, right? And that's absent of any type of narcotic or anything. It's just euphoria right there in front of you, right? Wonderful. I love how we do this in our lives because we can kind of look at ourselves and laugh. I'm like, yeah, like we're never satisfied with anything, right? Like somebody, I bought these little pack of donuts because I need a little something to eat this morning. Not much, so I bought the itty bitty mini ones, all right? And if my wife were with me, she would have said, the donut is good, but it would be better with... milk. With milk? Who says better with coffee? I expected to hear coffee, right? With milk. Some folks might go in that vein, right? But we all have something. But we don't just do this with the foods that we eat, do we? Right? We get to an issue or a situation in our life, and we're like, man, this is good, but it would be better if this, right? It's good, but it would be better. And there always seems to be something inside of us that's just not content. We always long for more. And that's exactly the issue that the Colossian church had. It's exactly the reason that Paul had to write the letter to the Colossians, because they had Jesus. And they were happy with Jesus, y'all. But they just believed that they could add a little bit more to Jesus, and it would be even better. So this is what they did. They added the Roman gods, like Apollo, right? And they had people in their culture and time that were worshiping idols. And they said, well, Jesus is good, but really to get everything out of life that I want, I need a little bit what? I need a little bit more, right? You had people in that day and time that were worshiping the mountains that were in the ranges right there around. They said, God is good, Jesus is good, but I just need to add a little bit more. And I'm just wondering if we do the same thing in church sometimes today, right? Jesus is good, but I have to worship the ball field. Jesus is good, but I have these career goals. Jesus is good, and you can put in any number of things. Jesus is good, but we try to add a little bit more, right? And here's the thing, y'all. There's a lot of things that we can add to our life that we think are going to make them better. Slide over to that next slide, if you would. But it would be like taking your bowl of ice cream and then just kind of going at a crapshoot and saying, all right, like sprinkles and chocolate syrup, I'm in, right? But what the world does is it gives us all types of different things, and it says, you should try this, you should try that. Can you imagine a bowl of vanilla ice cream with ketchup and mustard in it? It's terrible, right? I don't even want to think of what that would taste like. It just grosses me out to think about it. But this is exactly what we do with life. The world throws a whole bunch of stuff at you and says, yeah, you can have Jesus, you can have your ice cream, but you need to add all this other stuff. And you start adding everything that there is to add, and you get it, and you're like, this is just a mess. Has anybody in their life ever felt like their life was just a mess? Right? Like, I've got Jesus, and he's good. I don't want to get rid of him, but I just want to add a little bit more because that's what everybody else is doing. Y'all, here's the thing that I want you to see this morning. Go ahead to the next slide if you would. When we allow Jesus to lead our lives, he will lead you to more of himself, never to more than himself. Do you understand that? If your life is pointing you to something more than Jesus, that's the ketchup and the mustard. Run the other way. But when Jesus is leading your life, he's not going to point you to more than him. He's going to point you to more of him. And that's the place where we want to exist. And that's why Paul writes the letter. But then the people in that day and time were, but all of these other people, look, they're worshiping these gods. Just like in our culture, there are many people that are worshiping many different things. And they call it good. So how do we differentiate between what's good and what's bad? Paul says, let's look at the source. Let's look at who we're talking about. And I want you to decide if Jesus is enough in church this morning. I want you to look at the source. I want you to look at Jesus. And I want you to see if he is enough. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 23. Here's what it says. For the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him, what does it say? All things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn among the dead, so that in everything he might have, what is that word? He might have supremacy. He might have top place, top priority, right? For God was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in Jesus, in him, and through him to reconcile himself to all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through what? Through his blood that was shed on the cross. Verse 21. Then he talks to the audience and he says this. This is who Jesus is. Now look at who you were. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of what? Your evil behavior. Verse 22. But now he, Jesus, has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Say, I'm free. I'm free. Say, I'm free. I'm free. Because you are indeed. Through Jesus, you are free indeed. But he says this to end. If you, that's a clause, right? Now watch out for those. You are free if you continue in your what? In your faith. Not in all the things this world has to offer, but in your faith. Established and firm. And do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. The gospel that you have heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, of which I, Paul, have become a servant. You know, Paul knew the story and the goodness of Jesus. He killed Christians. And then later on, Jesus changed that man's life so radically that he would be killed for bringing other people to Jesus. That's how much of a difference Jesus made in his life. And as we're reading this text, one of the things that I want you to understand is a little bit about the day and time, the culture that we're in at this point in time. There's not a whole bunch of books that we read about things, so how do people learn? It was all through what they heard spoken. There was a lot of oral communication. And so we believe that this was a hymn at the most, at the very least a poem that the first century church passed around. It was something they could recite. And here are the things that it says, right? It tells you why Jesus is enough. Verse 15, once again, he is the image of the invisible God. He's the firstborn over creation. I love what Matt Chandler does when he's studying through this passage. He gives 3 examples. I'm going to give you those this morning. It says, if you want to know what God our Father is like, look to Jesus. And what was Jesus? He was merciful. You remember the lady in John chapter 8? She had been caught in the act of adultery. Whoa, right? Brought in front of a crowd of people, and they throw the woman down. Where's the guy? Right? They throw the woman down, and they say the Old Testament tells us that this lady should be stoned, and Jesus is down there writing in the dirt. We don't know what he's writing, right? Could have been any number of things. But he looks up at them. Do you remember what he said? Let any one of you who is without a sin be the first one to cast a stone. He looks at this woman who's caught at her worst. And he doesn't say, yeah, kill her. Take her life. He says, no, all of you who think that you got this just right. And then the only one who lived a perfect life, he doesn't pick up a stone. He picks her up and says, hey, there's a better way for you to go. He shows her mercy and says, go and sin no more. He gave her new life, a new opportunity, because God is a God of mercy. Not only is he a God of mercy, y'all, but he is a God who is compassionate. When we look in John chapter 13, really interesting story. Jesus has some really close friends. Yell out the names of your really close friends real fast. Who are they? Ready, set, go. I mean, nobody said my name. That hurts my feelings. Jesus had some really close friends. All right? In John chapter 13, we get to read a little bit about the interaction that they are having. There's these 2 ladies, Mary and Martha, and they've been followers of Jesus for a really long time. And they send message to Jesus that their brother, Lazarus, who he's also really close to, is sick. They say, Jesus, we need you like yesterday. We need you. And you know what Jesus does? He waits 3 more days before he goes. Man, that's not a good friend right there, Jesus. Jesus shows up, and he leaves no question that something special is getting ready to happen. And the dude already knew what he was going to do, because he tells his disciples, this sickness will not end in death, but in glory that goes to God. Right? That's awesome. But I want you to see compassion. See, that's not just helping somebody out. He showed up 3 days late. How's that compassionate, Glenn? He shows up 3 days late with the intention of raising this man back from the dead. He knows what he's going to do already. But he's so overcome by the grief that they feel that we read that Jesus weeps in that moment. He saw that the people in his life were hurting. And he stopped. Like, he knew what he was getting ready to do. But he felt their pain. And he said, I get it. And he stopped and he cried with them for a moment because he felt their pain. Because our God is a God of compassion. He is the image of the invisible God. God cares about the things that are going on in your life. And when your heart is broken about something, God cares. And he weeps with you and for you and wants to help you. He's just waiting on an invitation. God is a God of mercy. He's a God of compassion. We read from Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 to 16. I like this passage. For we do not have a high priest. Jesus is our high priest, who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. But we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, and yet he did not sin. Listen to what verse 16 says. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with what? With confidence. Why can we come to God with confidence? Because we know that he understands us. He's been through it. He knows where we're standing, the struggles that we're going through right now. And then we receive mercy and find grace to help when? Not when things are great, but in our time of need. When you need Jesus, there's nothing that gives him more joy than to be there in that time and in that place, to cry with you, to care about you, and to help you find a way through. He just also happens to have all the power in all the world, so he's a pretty doggone good friend to have. I'd invite you to get to know him. The last thing that we see about Jesus is that he is all-powerful. He healed people that were sick, raised people back to life who were dead, right? But in Luke chapter 8, there's this really neat story. They're on their way from one place to another. They have to sail across the Sea of Galilee. How many of you were touched by that storm on Thursday? Anybody feel some wind, some lightning, things like that? Hopefully that's all that it was, nothing more than that. We got like those alarms going off about 11:40 at my place, and y'all got them later than that, so God bless you. You didn't get any rest that night. But we know what it's like to be in the middle of a storm. Jesus gets on a boat, and his disciples start to notice that the storm's coming, and when it comes upon a man, it's beating them up. And these are seafaring guys, like they're fishermen. They've done this before, right? Well, maybe except for Matthew. Matthew's probably scared out of his mind. But the rest of them, they've been on the water before. And they get up, they're like, Jesus, don't you care that we're getting ready to die? And they don't have any peace. Even though Jesus is with them, they don't have any what? How many of us is that true about this moment? You got Jesus, all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing, with you. And yet in your life today, you don't have any peace. Jesus is like, man, it's just a little thing. I'm with you. You ain't got to worry about it. And he looks at him and he says, you of little faith. And then he stands up and he's like, waters, rain, shut up. And they stopped, right? And I want you to look at the passage. Here's what it says. In fear and amazement, they asked one another a really important question that we're answering this morning. What does he say? What do they say? Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him. Who is he? Paul would say it. He is the image of the invisible God. You want to know what he's like? You want to know what God our Father is like? What type of power he has at his disposal? You look at Jesus. You see what he had the power to do. And that's the God that we serve. He's the image of the invisible God. The next part's kind of comical. I like that Paul threw it in. He says, he is the firstborn over all creation. In the New Testament times, the firstborn got all the rights to everything. Like basically they won the lottery just by being born, right? It's pretty cool if you were the firstborn. Sorry, secondborns. Right? Too bad. I was the firstborn. I would have gotten everything. But God looks down, and through the Apostle Paul and through this hymn, he says he's the firstborn. He's the most important. And he's the firstborn over creation. Firstborn over creation. He's different than we are. Here's how. I'm not going to go all the way through the birds and bees talk. Let's have a little bit of it right now. You ready? When a man and a woman come... No, I'm just kidding. All of our parents had a time when they got together, and they really enjoyed that time. And you and I came 10 months later. And that's been how things have been done since the very beginning. Except for who? Jesus. No sexual activity took place. God's Spirit came down on a woman and placed Jesus inside of her without any sexual activity, and she gave birth 10 months later to a child. That child was a sinless Son of God, born into the world. He's the firstborn over all of creation, not of creation, not in creation. We were born in creation. He's born over creation. He's above it. There's something different about him and how he came to be on the planet. And if you overlook that, man is so rich, right? There's something special about Jesus and how he came to us. We celebrate that on Christmas, but it's something to celebrate even now because it makes him special. It makes him different. The Spirit of God caused that to happen. And y'all, the really cool part, as we think about it, is this, The next thing goes right on to tell us why this is even more special, because not only was he born, but he was there when things were created in the very beginning. Look at verse 16. It says this, for in him all things were what? All things were created. Things in heaven and on earth. Things that you can see and things that you can't. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and what? Through him, by him, and for him. So now he is the one who is in charge. These people were thinking of trusting in created things. How many of you have trusted in some created things in your lifetime? How'd that work out for you? That thing 10 years ago that promised to change your life, where is it today? Right? Not where you thought. You're not where you thought you'd be. Because here's the thing, y'all. We trust in created things to bring us satisfaction and to make us full. And Paul looks and he says, Jesus is more. And Jesus is enough. Because he's not a created thing. He's the one who created all of it. You see the case that he's making? Jesus is enough. He's the only way to ever experience enough. He is before all things, verse 17. And in him all things hold together. Remember that old Bible school song? Let's sing it together this morning. He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 That's where it comes from. Colossians chapter 1, verse 17. And in him all things are held together. We don't exist without him. Not only is that true in creation, but then verse 18, he's the head of the body of the church. Y'all, we don't have a reason to meet here this morning without Jesus. There'd be no reason for you to get up on Sunday morning if it were not for Jesus. He's the beginning and the firstborn, not just among creation, but among the dead, so that in everything he might have supremacy. I want to tell you two stories, and then we're going to get close to closing this thing down for today, okay? He established the church for us, y'all. And the church is a special place where miraculous things still take place by the power of God's Spirit working through us. Sometimes we see it, and when we do, it's awesome. Many times we don't. There's a story of a couple that I met a few years ago who the husband had been unfaithful to his wife. That marriage looked what? It looked dead. Like it wasn't going anywhere. But they decided they were going to try church one more time. They thought Jesus might have an answer to our dead marriage. And so they showed up and found a group of people that loved on them and cared for them and nurtured them and helped them. They got into a marriage class. And their marriage had new life breathed into it because of the power of Jesus working through God's people in the church. Wow. That's awesome, right? And that's what Jesus does. That's what's established. Because he rose from the dead, we have power to bring dead things back to life. Sin says, oh, that's never going to happen. And Jesus says, you wait just a minute. Watch what I can do. There was a little boy, I was told of his story just a few weeks ago. An EMT was sitting in with a young man who had a severe sickness and illness. And they had gone to the emergency room to get some help and discovered this illness that was very rare. And where he was at the emergency room, they didn't have enough of the machines and stuff they needed to be able to give him the care that they needed. So this EMT is riding with this young man, probably 4 or 5 years old, over to the hospital, and things don't look good. And some of you who do EMT work, God bless you, because you get to see some of the worst things, and you do that, and you care for people and love on them, and just thank you for what you do and how you care for people. This EMT was just shaken to her core because she knew that she was going to drop the little boy off and probably wasn't going to make it. That stirred in her heart so much that 2 weeks later she decided life is short. I've got to make the most of it. So she came to a church service and sat in, and there was a guy standing up on stage that weekend who told a story and was thanking the congregation. Thank you so much for your prayers. You'll never believe what God did. We showed up at the hospital, and we thought that my son was as good as dead. And when they hooked him up to the machines and did all the scans, whatever was wrong with him in that emergency room an hour away was completely gone. And it wasn't there anymore. And I don't know how to explain it to you other than thank you for your prayers and praise God. And that EMT, right? We think that he received healing from God. That EMT on that day knew that was the same family that she was serving. And she said, man, if Jesus is that good, I want some. And he came and made her into a brand new creation. And she was brought into a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ because God established the church. And through Jesus, there's power when we come together and we serve Him like we're supposed to. Y'all, that's who we are. That's who God is. He's all powerful. He's all good. He's all knowing. He's everywhere all at once. And He wants to know you. He wants to know you. He wants to know you. Sometimes we settle for things. The world has a lot to offer to us. Verse 21, let's go to that real fast if we can. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. Right? We've all had evil behaviors. Those things in our life that we thought were just going to fill us up. We had that. Man, life is full. It's good. Life is great. What happened? You ever been there? Man, this is the world telling me everything that you need right here, baby. It's going to be good. You're set for life. Hold up. Wait a minute. What happened? And you've lived through cycles of this in your life. Like, man, I've tried everything this world has to offer, and they keep telling me it's going to fill me up, and I feel full for like 5 minutes, and then after that, I'm completely empty. So Jesus gives another invitation. He says, you were once far off, and your life was governed by all that evil behavior. Go to verse 22. But now He has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through His death to present you holy in His sight, without blemish and free from accusation. You come to Jesus and you give Him your junk, and He turns it into a masterpiece. Some of you know this story because you're living it right now. You said, man, I didn't have anything good to offer to God. He says, man, I got you. Don't worry. And you still got to go to work tomorrow. You still need some things that this world has to offer, right? So you still got some money and all that good stuff, but 10 years from now, guess what? The money you make tomorrow is going to be what? Going to be gone. But Jesus gives you an invitation. He says, accept me and I'm never going anywhere. I'll always be with you. I'll help you be the best husband you've ever been. I'll help you be the best dad that you've ever been. I'll help you be the best wife that you've ever been. I'll help you if you ain't even married in a relationship yet. I'll help you find the right person for you. Because I believe God wants to do something through some of your lives. Through all of your lives. He says, man, you're coaching right now. Don't let that be your God. He says, but let me use that as an opportunity so that you can make a difference for the gospel. How do we get to experience this God who is enough instead of adding and adding and adding and coming up empty and empty and empty? Look at verse 23. Here's what Paul says to this church as we close out today. If you, what's that word? You said it like you didn't mean it.
Continue.
What does it say? If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope that is held out in the gospel. That's how you experience this God who is more than enough. Some of you are here this morning and you've never made Jesus Christ the Lord and the Savior of your life. Paul did it. He gave his life over to Jesus, and he said, I was the worst of all sinners. He said, but God saved me so that I could be a testimony to how good He was. And some of you this morning are sitting in your place and you're saying, God doesn't want anything to do with me. Au contraire. He wants everything to do with you, and He will take you just as you are. You only need to come to Him. Let's stand together. If you need to make that decision, we invite you to do so as we stand and sing.